So today, our lesson is about probability words, and we will learn how to use the correct words to describe probability. So we have an activity. I need you to take a look at these pictures and you tell me which one of them has the greatest chance of happening where you live today. For me, the first picture has the greatest chance of happening where I live. You have a group of people buying groceries from a supermarket. Okay, so for you it may be a different picture, so you need to check and see which of them has the greatest chance of happening where you live today. Now let's take a look at the meaning of probability. Now probability is how likely something is to happen, or we can simply say that probability is the chance of something happening. So when you do something such as rolling a dice, this is called an event. And the possible results of the event are called its outcomes. So for example, when you roll a dice, you have 6 possible outcomes because a dice is numbered from 1 to 6. So when you roll a dice, you have 6 possible outcomes. Also, when you flip a coin, you have 2 possible outcomes because you either have a head or a tail. A coin is made up of 2 parts. The front part is the head and the other part is the tail. So you have 2 possible outcomes. Now when you flip a coin or you roll a dice, the outcome is random, which simply means that the outcome cannot be predicted. A probability scale is a simple way of showing probabilities. And here are some of the words you will come across when talking about probability. So these are some of the words we use when talking about whether something will happen. So we have the following words: impossible, very unlikely, unlikely, even chance. Another name for this is 50-50 chance. Likely, very likely, and certain. So here's a probability scale, and on the probability scale we have the words impossible, very unlikely, unlikely, even chance. Another name for this is 50-50 chance. We also have likely, we have very likely, and we have certain. So we're given 7 statements and we need to find out the position of these statements on the probability scale. So I'm going to start with the first one. The probability that the sun will rise tomorrow is certain. So on the probability scale, it's certain. Number 2, the probability that you will live to be 500 years, that's impossible. So on the probability scale, you have it on impossible. Number 3, the probability that a newborn baby will be a boy, that's an even chance because a newborn baby could either be a boy or a girl. So that's an even chance. The probability that you will see a bus on your way to the mall, that's likely. And number 5, the probability that the next car that will drive past your house will be green, that's unlikely because green cars are not too common. And number 6, the probability that 5 students will be named Tom in one classroom is very unlikely. And the last one, which is number 7, the probability of scoring a number under 6 when you roll a dice is very likely. So as you can see, we've been able to represent each of these statements on the probability scale to show the position in which they fall on the scale. So let's take a look at example 1. Which is the more likely outcome? Flipping tails on a coin or rolling a number less than 5 on a dice? Now let's take a look at the first one. A coin can only land 2 ways. Either you have the head or you have the tail. So there is an even chance of landing on tails. On the other hand, on a dice you have 4 numbers less than 5. Remember I mentioned earlier that a dice is numbered from 1 to 6. So on a dice, there are 4 numbers less than 5 and the 2 numbers that are not. So there is a more than an even chance of rolling a number less than 5 because we have numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there is more than an even chance of rolling a number less than 5. So to answer the question, which says which is the more likely outcome, flipping tails on a coin or rolling a number less than 5 on a dice. So rolling a number less than 5 is more likely than getting tails when a coin is flipped, because when you flip a coin you have a 50-50 chance, you have an even chance. Meanwhile, when you roll a number less than 5 on a dice, there is more than an even chance of getting that. Example 2. Match each of these outcomes to a position on a probability scale. So we have the first one, it will snow in the winter in London. So the answer to that is this: it usually snows in the winter, but not always. So this event is very likely. The second one says you will come to school in a helicopter. Of course, unless you're very rich, this is very unlikely to happen. And the third one says the next person to walk through the door will be male. As the next person to come through the door will either be male or female. So this is an even chance, because it's a 50-50 chance. A male can walk in, or rather a female can also walk in. So in this case we have an even chance. And the last one says when a normal dice is thrown, the score will be 8. Remember that a die is numbered from 1 to 6. So the chance of getting 8 on a die is impossible. So placing each of these statements on the probability scale, we have this. A will be on very likely, B will be on very unlikely on the probability scale, C will be on even chance, and D will be on impossible. So you have the probability scale shown just right above the question. Example 3. A letter is picked at random from one of these two boxes. Copy and complete these sentences. So we have box 1 and box 2. In box 1 we have letters A, B, C, and D. And in box 2 we have letters A, C, and D. Now if you take a closer look at box 1 and box 2, you discover that we have 12 letters. Never mind, some of the letters are repeated, but we have to count all together. So in box 1 we have 12 letters, and in box 2 we also have 12 letters. So we need to find the probability of picking a letter from any of the boxes using the words impossible, likely, unlikely, very unlikely, and or 50-50 chance. So I'm going to start with the first one. The probability of picking a letter B from box 2 is impossible, because if you take a closer look at box 2, you discover that we do not have letter B. So the probability of picking a letter B from box 2 is impossible. The second one, the probability of picking a letter A from box 2 is likely. If you take a look at box 2, we have quite a number of letter A, about 7 of them. So the probability of picking a letter A from box 2 is likely. Also, the probability of picking a letter C from box 1 is unlikely, because in box 1 we have 2 letters C. So the probability of picking a letter C from box 1 is unlikely. The probability of picking a letter D from box 1 is very unlikely, because if you take a look at box 1, we have just 1 letter D. So the probability is very unlikely. And finally, the probability of picking a letter B from box 1 is 50-50. That's an even chance, because in box 1 we have a total number of 12 letters, and letter B, it's up to 6 in box 1. If you count the number of letter B we have in box 1, they are up to 6. That's like half of the letters we have in box 1. So the probability of picking a letter B from box 1 is 50-50. And another name for that is even chance.